Hi, Tracey.
Hi, Michelle.
My love. I am so excited to be sitting here with you as we get to explore some of the themes and concepts of your new book, Match Striking for Beginners.
Yeah. The subtitle, right? Yeah,
Activating individual and collective power for a more just world.
Oh, all right. There you go.
Hi.
You got it down.
Who has been along with you on this journey from really the very beginning?
Oh, very beginning.
Well,
Yes.
I mean, there's an origin story to it, so I don't know if it was the very, very beginning.
Well, the beginning of when I put pen to paper.
That's right.
That's right.
So yes, I not only know the title, but I know the subtitle.
Yes.
And I also know deeply the heart and passion that you put into this book.
Oh,
and it's so good.
Thank you.
So I am excited to be sitting here with you. As you know, mentioned, have had the honor of reading your book, really in its first iteration, and then in a more recent iteration.
And you were one of my test readers. Yeah. I had several test readers. So a shout out to all my test readers who were amazing and gave me really great feedback.
Absolutely. So. Who gave you the the most in-depth feedback, complete with a red line? My favorite thing to do.
Well, that's because you like to edit everything.
I do.
Yeah,
so
it's a passion.
For any editors out there, I am open and available for employment. No, I really do. I enjoyed helping in any way that I could and supporting you as you really poured out the message of your heart. And I'm really so proud of what you did.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. And people are going to think you actually edited the book, but it was actually edited by the publishing company, Practical Inspiration. But Michelle really wanted that role badly. So, maybe someday.
Maybe so. Now, look, don't get me wrong. I would have also edited it, but Practical Inspiration and their team did an amazing job. So, unfortunately, there was nothing for me to do.
Right. You're like, oh, they didn't even leave a period for me to correct or a comma.
And for this Virgo, that's hard.
I know. Super hard for a Virgo.
I wanted to put my mark in there, but maybe I did.
Yeah.
You never know.
I know. Well, I'm excited. I'm excited for the launch in June. I'm excited to share the message of my heart in this book. I put, it's been almost 5 years ago that when I was reflecting and journaling in Bisbee, Arizona, it came to me to write a book, and I wrote that down in my journal. Then it just started flowing through me, like what the book would be, what would it be about, my approach, all of those things, and started writing those down and journaling those. So it's super cool to be sitting here now, and I started writing the book actually in February of 2023, and now here I am in February 2024, and it's done. Last week, the editors were like, we're done, pens down, and now I get to choose the font. I'm looking at font, and it'll be printed soon. So it's super exciting to have done it, have actually accomplished it. My neighbor was so funny. She was so cute. She was like, oh my God, you actually did it. You're like the only person I know who says they're going to do something and actually does it. And I thought, well, that's a great compliment. Thank you. But it is an undertaking to write a book. I had no idea really what I was getting into. And it's not easy by any means, but I had a lot of support and a lot of people who, were there for me along the journey. And I'm just so excited to share the book. So
that's cool.
Yeah.
You know what I love too? For some reason, I think I mentioned this on a couple episodes, but I was really just very taken by Suzanne and our conversation with her about elemental witchcraft and her being a friend of ours and just so much about what she's about, that it just came to me. I love the cycle that you started, right? That this book emerged and really, began in the springtime in 2023. And here you are in the springtime of 2024 as you're ready to kind of let it emerge to the world. I love it.
Yeah. It's super, it's super cool. And it was something that I manifested, a few years back, a handful of years back, and here we are today. So I'm just I did it, and you just don't really recognize how big a deal it is until people start telling you how big a deal it is. And it's right. Oh yeah, I guess it is, because I just once I was into it, and it really started to flow. And, I look forward to sharing what I learned along the journey with other, people out there who I really feel strongly the power of people's stories, and encouraging them to share their story, and that your story has value and it can create impact for other people. And so helping people, understand, how do you do that? You don't just sit down and start writing, really. I mean, it's there is a process involved. So I look forward to like being able to share, because there's always been so many people who have helped me along my journey. I'll give a shout out to Ginger Eden, who's a local author and a good friend of mine, who's, I don't know that I would have been able to know, like, what do I do? Like, without her kind of giving me some guidance too along her journey. And she's wrote like 30 books now, so she kind of knows, she knows how to get it done.
That's
and,
right. That's right.
Yeah.
And fellow disruptor, you can go back and listen to Ginger's episode to learn more about who she is and all the amazing things that she's done.
Yeah.
But speaking of doing amazing things, I feel like very lucky to know that there is so much of you to offer to the world. You can't possibly put it all in one book. So this is me manifesting, maybe another book or 2 or 3 to come, putting it out there. But what are some of the aspects of this particular book, as you really, kind of wrote this first message of your heart, then you think make it unique?
Well, I mean, you look at the purpose of the book is really to, to share my story too, and a little bit of my own wisdom, my journey, and what I have found to be is an impactful way to create not only individual change for yourself, your own journey of personal development, but how you create impact, make a difference in the world. Mm-hmm. And how you go about that. And so I certainly have a method and a playbook that I've created over my time on this earth of how you accomplish that. And so the book really hits on kind of my elements of my story, of my unique experience as a woman, as a queer woman, as a leader in tech, my experience in law enforcement, and how I went about successfully activating my personal power to create impactful change. So I'm sharing a lot of that, but I'm also sharing real world stories of others and the voices of others, many people who have worked with me, and people who I just look up to and admire, who, have also shared their stories, and then stories that people will recognize, to really like drive home the message and show you that, you can do this, and that you are enough to create change. And together that we can make a difference, and we can make a big difference in this world. So I really use those real world stories. I'm taking my own story, sharing a lot of my own personal story with the world. The other thing I do is I incorporate what I call chapter activators, and how to activate what you're doing. And those kind of show up at the end of every chapter. So there'll be a lot of things around, like things you can reflect on, questions you can reflect on. I provide a lot of personal power tips from my own experience and the experience of others that have really helped work in activating your personal power. I talk a little bit about unleashing your inner superhero, which you'll hear more about when you read the book, and what I mean by that. I also provide a lot of manifestation affirmations that you can use. I leverage a lot of those in my daily practice, and those are something that I have leveraged along my journey as I've gotten older, and on my own personal self-growth journey, that have really been instrumental in helping me stay focused, and doing, actually bringing things forth that I put out there. So I share those at the end of every chapter, I think, which really is something unique to the book. The other thing is that it's really a playbook for those who are marginalized, and it's a playbook that it goes above and beyond recognizing the impacts and the unique challenges that marginalized groups face, that women in marginalized groups face. Mm-hmm. And I don't think everybody does that. Like, there's a lot of books, there's a lot of personal development gurus out there that, make it sound easy. And the reality is, it's not easy if you're a member of a marginalized group or community, historically marginalized group. So So, I kind of bring it real and raw in that it's not going to be easy. I'm not going to paint a big rainbow for you picture of how it can be. It's like these are the realities of what you may face. And these are some of the steps that I've taken and others have taken to remove those blockers or get around those challenges and blockers to be effective and successful. So I think that's an important part of the book too, is that I really try to honor and respect the journey that women and historically marginalized groups, that their experiences and what they face, and how you address that and how you, remove those blockers.
Yeah. Yeah, I not that I need to agree with, but I
Hmm.
see and all of that resonates with me. Something else that I can't help but say, because I've also been privy to a lot of the feedback that you've received, right, from your test readers, and these are people that are very close to you, in a lot of ways, know you
Hmm.
very well. But what I
And
love,
some of them that don't.
yeah, and some people that don't,
Some of my
absolutely.
test readers did not really know that much about me before they read my book. So,
Sure. Well, this was a crash course for them. I know. But it's like it's almost to a person, part of a significant part of the response is like this book either tells me, shows me, right, or reminds
hmm,
me that we all have individual power, right?
yeah.
That we can do this thing. And then it's to your point, it's the chapter activators, it's the ways in which you get to that space for yourself that
Hmm.
are just so deeply moving.
Yeah. I think some of the feedback, some of the most moving feedback that I heard from some of the test readers, and all of the test readers were women and members of marginalized communities. And some of the consistent feedback that I heard is that they felt heard. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that is really important to me, is that they read what they're reading, they feel like they feel seen
Mm-hmm.
and they feel heard and they feel like, okay, like here's somebody who can help me, who understands elements of my journey,
Yeah.
who shares some of those components of my journey, and together we can move forward collectively with power, and create change, not only for our personal lives, but for the lives of others.
Yeah, I love it. And that was a beautiful opportunity to discuss one of the
Hmm.
central themes, I think, of your work. And it's something that was really impactful. The whole thing was impactful to me, but something that I really enjoy discussing. And it's, the concept of assembling community for collective action. It's a hugely important concept, but again, it's also a
Hmm.
huge concept, right? A big concept. And and I think for most people, maybe like me, it doesn't sound easy.
Hmm.
Not that anything worth it is ever really easy, but it just sounds, maybe the word is daunting.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't know, where do we begin?
Yeah, it's not easy. And I think before I talk about where we begin, is we have to get, to a certain extent, getting comfortable with the difficult.
Mm,
And it's like getting comfortable with the unknown, getting comfortable with the difficult. And the more and more we get comfortable with the difficult, um, we become more powerful within ourselves. We can overcome the difficulties. I hate using the word easier, but sometimes easier, sometimes not, and sometimes I don't sell people this false narrative
mhm.
that all those things are going to go away. I talk about how we can, how we can manage them and how we can overcome them in the moment. Um, so as we go along that journey, but the when we talk about collective action and where it begins, like a lot of people, they really, they start with, okay, this is how you build groups, this is how you develop community, this is how you move forward. And the component that we don't talk a lot about is that you can't find and build community without starting with yourself first, and really going inside and looking at, what woundedness we carry with us, because that woundedness many times can be a blocker to community building, community, and moving together in community. So one of the things that I dive deep into is that, we have to really work on ourselves and our own personal self growth, and really address the woundedness and some of the things that we carry with us before we can truly like unleash that inner
Mhm.
superhero and ignite our own personal power, to find and build that community for collective action. So I believe that building community is necessary for social change, but building community, bringing community together for collective action, is not going to be effective unless we focus also, on ourselves, and we start with ourselves. So I talk a lot about that throughout the book before we even get to the chapter on collective action.
Yeah, right.
So so that just gives you a little bit of a little bit of an example there. And then I talk about also, just as continuing to talk about a little bit of the insights that are in the book, and some of the teasers, is that I believe that you find and build a community, and it begins right where you're at. And some people see community, building community, finding community for, and building for collective action as this big thing that's out there, and it's like, where do I even begin to find that? And many times it's right where you're at. um, and and we once you start building that community, once you find it right where you're at, you'll create this circle of safety. You'll activate others. As you activate yourself, you'll activate others, whether your intention is to activate others or not, particularly if you start talking about it. And we'll talk a little bit more about it, and a little bit about, like, talking about it out loud, and talking about the things that are breaking your heart, and you will find a community will start to kind of show up. And that's an important piece. And the other thing I talk about is, like, we need one another. Like, we tend to, and even now, after we've seen with the pandemic, we're struggling with loneliness. We spend a lot of time alone. We're still in a world that we're interacting more and more in a digital online environment, less in person kind of interactions, and we've seen what that's done to us to a certain extent. And how important it is to have community and have those interactions with people, because it's really hard for us to continually activate our own personal power if we don't have others around us supporting us who have a similar mindset, who have, or on a similar path of self-awareness and growth, who are also moving forward in a purposeful way. It's really hard for us to stay consistent and stay in it if we don't have that around us. And sometimes we beat up on ourselves that we think, well, why shouldn't we be able to do that alone? Well, we're built for community. We're built for collective interactions and action on behalf of our communities. So I think that's really, that's a key component, is there's a lot of work that has to happen in that self space and that self personal development for us to really be able to then find and then build community and do it in an effective way.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think my frame, right, has really been shifted. So, like, where I started out saying, like, wow, build a community, that seems big and it seems daunting and it seems hard. What I'm hearing from you is there's a comfort in the community. There's an uplifting, right? There's maybe a common valuing, and really, there's almost like a strength in numbers, or an ease in that, kind of those numbers or that community.
Yeah, I mean, there is. And I think uh, especially when you recognize your own value and you recognize your own personal power, and then you start to encircle yourself with people who also recognize their value and their personal power, and then movement happens. And that's really the biggest blocker. When you look at what is the biggest blocker to building community and movements, that really will create change, it is, there are a lot of people who are standing there who don't see their own value and their own personal power, and they're like, how can I make a difference? Really, what can I do in this space? So they don't recognize their own value, and that's why it really begins with self. Is once people are able to recognize their own value, their own personal power, and they're able to do that consistently and continually, then all of a sudden things start to change for them individually, and then start to really, things in the universe, people around you start to show up, and then that collective activation can occur, because then you can really start building community that can effectively move forward together.
Yeah.
People have to see that they're superheroes. And most people you'll go up to and say, "Do you think you're a superhero?" And they'll be like, "A superhero? What are you talking about? What am I a superhero in?"
Yeah.
So I talk a lot throughout the book, and talk a lot about different methods that I've used and others have used that have been effective in really overcoming that self-doubt and those limiting beliefs and thoughts that really keep us in a place where we don't have movement in our own lives. We aren't living for ourselves. We aren't achieving the desires of our heart, and we're sure not going above and beyond and making a difference, because we're kind of stuck. We're stuck in that space of, we don't even see our own true value and personal power that we have.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think I've had personal experience of feeling stuck in that space. And what strikes me as well about the power of community is rising out of that space of, like, kind of, what impact am I having? What good am I doing? Oftentimes is, a well-placed comment. It's a phone call. It's a email from somebody that I would consider to be part of my community, who says, anything, but really with the effect of, you don't know how much impact you're making, but I can see it, or others can see it, right? Or trust that it's there. So I just think that has to be, value of community too. Something that, that I think we've talked about before in that personal exploration is, you're not always going to be perfect. Like, we're all going to stumble, right? We're all going to fall. But community can be there to lift you up.
Yeah, and you're not going to experience that unless you're being real, unless you're being authentic, and you're showing up. People are not going to show up that way for you. A lot of the engagement and a lot of the conversations that people are having are very superficial, and they're just like concerned about, what's this person thinking of me, or what am I trying, sometimes very selfish reasons. But how many people are having truly, like, deep, authentic, conversation, showing vulnerability, and showing up, with all of those feelings and all of those emotions, and sharing those with people, and being vulnerable, and being honest, and being transparent. That doesn't happen, all the time. And it does, and those people won't show up, like, if you're showing up real and authentic, it tends to repel the people who are being fake and can't, like, that makes them very
uncomfortable.
It makes them very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But if you're showing up that way, people who are that way, or they want to be that way, that energy will attract them in. And then you start to build that community of people that do have that same mindset, and that same focus, and that same growth, that they are not afraid to show up and be real and authentic.
Yeah.
So,
that's the vision. And I think what so many of us strive for every day. So I think, again, your book is really impactful in reminding us that we're capable of it, and capable of building this community, right? That it's not some daunting task, but that, to your point, once you're authentic and showing up for others, or, even for yourself, others are going to respond to that.
Yeah.
So, so it's one thing to build a community. How do you build a community that's ready to take collective action? I mean, that seems to me then like the next level, right? Like, level up from building community.
Well, there's a lot in my book around that. I don't think we can cover all that off in 30 minutes. I think one important component is that, you can't build a community without a shared vision, and a narrative. And I say that shared vision and narrative needs to be grounded in truth, right? And transparency, and in integrity. If it's not grounded in those things, like, nobody's going to latch onto that vision. You may convince them for a while, but then they see that there's not integrity in it or truth in it. They'll walk away from it. You might sell them for a little bit, right? Because there's a lot of people that share that, have this vision and draw people towards that vision, and then their intentions are not coming from a place of integrity. So for me, It's important if if you're really going to create impactful change, if you're going to have collective action, that vision needs to be grounded in truth and it needs to be grounded in integrity. And people will recognize that. And then the other thing, I had a little bit of a cough, so hang in there with me, and allergies and sinus and everything else. Um, the the other thing that is important is that you have to figure out what is your vision, or if you hear somebody else's vision, recognize, is that my vision, and people, I really believe that, when you have when you have a vision and it comes from that place of finding your purpose and what broke your heart, or seeing a space that really, you're being drawn to. And I speak a lot about in that book how you recognize purpose, how you identify it. And when you really start to recognize it and you identify it and you step into that space, and you start to think, I have a vision of how I can create impact, and you share that vision, you share that message with other people, and you share it out loud, that people are going to start to show up, that they will show up, but you have to share it out loud. And I really believe that there is in people this desire to want to do more. There is, I've worked in these corporate environments, I've worked in other environments where people just day to day going through the motions.
Right.
They're doing their job. A lot of people don't even enjoy what they're doing. A large number don't enjoy it. They're under a lot of pressure. They're putting a lot of hours. They feel like they're not, doing a lot of things that they really want, that's really driving their heart. But then they see harm happen, or they see things that are really heartbreaking to them, and they think, gosh, I wish I could make a difference. And it keeps coming to them. And there are people who either walk away and they just stay in that space that they're in, or there's people that choose to step into that. And when you step into it and you start to talk about it, even if you haven't fully developed that vision, and you start to share that, there are other people, and I believe this, there are other people who are looking for that, who may have that shared vision. They've seen the same thing, or it's drawing them, or they just want to help. They want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. They want to make a difference in this world, and they have no idea how to do that. And all of a sudden, you've shared something where now there's more than one person, and then there's more than two people, and then there's more than three people, and champions start to show up, and people start to show up. and and I tell people that if you look at the history of movements and change, all the leaders of those movements and change who helped drive those, create those movements, they had a clear vision. Had a clear vision. And so a vision is really important. And even if you're not out to like create this big movement, you just want to create change where you're at, in a corporation that you're at, in a community that you're at. It's having a vision and sharing that. One of those steps is sharing that vision. Now there's a lot of other steps involved that I talk about, but one of those steps is sharing that vision, and people will start to show up because they're drawn to wanting to do something. Visions inspire people. It gets them excited about doing something that's very mission driven. And you can do that wherever you're at. And so it really inspires them. It provides direction. It allows their creative juices to start to flow, and they start to think about what can I do? What will my role be? And helping me, lead us, or help us all get to this, big vision that we might have. And so it's very inspiring too. And sharing that vision out loud is super important. And when you share it out loud, people will show up. And I talk a little bit about in my book and the times when I have shared my vision. I give, some examples from Uber and sharing my vision and how people showed up. And so there's a lot of information I provide in the book around that, and around that piece and that component, and how important it is. And the other thing I remind people is that there are people who are not going to show up. In fact, there are people who are going to hear your vision and say, well, that's stupid, or I don't know, that's risky, or I don't know, that's going to cost money, or you can't do that. You don't even know what you're talking about. I mean, you're going to hear, in those moments when you have opportunity to create impactful difference in this world, that's when it gets really loud that you can't do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It gets really loud on the inside of your head, and it gets really loud outside and around you, because everything wants to stop you a lot of times from doing that, because you're starting to recognize there's something here I can do, and I want to do that. And there will be forces that come against you as much as there will be forces that stand up for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And and just knowing that just because somebody doesn't buy into it, just because they don't think it's a good idea, doesn't mean it isn't. And don't let that stop you. There's, sometimes a feeling that we feel like we have to have everybody on board. Everybody has to like us and everybody has to like our vision for it to be impactful. And the truth is, we don't. A lot of change that has been created and a lot of movements and those things that happen, we don't need everybody on board to make it happen. We just need the right people on board, and those right people will show up. And together we can activate our personal power collectively to really create some big impact at the end of the day.
Yeah. I love it. There's so much more we could dig into. And there's so many little like threads that I want to pull out. But I know that the best thing that anybody can do who's listening to us and is also really interested is to go read the book. Because I think, you take a lot of those threads and you create pathways into, kind of that activation, right? Explaining and helping, the reader really understand where they can unleash their personal power, and then it moves into this collective space, right?
Yeah.
For bigger action.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the book, I want as many people as possible to read the book. Certainly, I want that message, the message of my heart, to get out there. But this book is for women and historically marginalized groups. And for them, it's inspiring them, giving them the tools they need, helping them get through the blockers, helping them really create the change that, I say this like our hearts ache for, the individual change that may be needed, but the collective change that we can make together. And really, my heart is for people, and for people who are like me, and other people who are a part of groups who have been dismissed, who have been oppressed, who have been, challenged, who feel like every step of the way, who feel like, in organizations, they're not in great numbers. Maybe they were like me. They might be the only queer leader, in an organization. They might be the only, woman of color. It's for these groups and these people. And I hope that I'm very hopeful that sharing my story, and I know that it's powerful, sharing my story and some of the things I've learned and the things that I believe strongly in, and what I've been able to achieve and the lessons I've learned and the difficulties I've faced, can be an encouragement and inspiration. But most importantly, I'm not just out to encourage and inspire people. I want to give them the tools they need, the tools that they're looking for. May not be all the tools, but it's going to give them some good tools to move forward and to be able to create some impactful change.
Yeah, it reminds me of a piece of, I think, really impactful feedback. That we won't attribute until maybe this particular person has a chance to be on the podcast, which I'm excited about. But it's this idea that no matter where you are in your journey, right? So your book is titled Match Striking for Beginners, but really that's not to indicate that there's a beginning, middle, or end, and there's a particular person or space that this book is for. I think,
Yeah.
As a woman and part of a marginalized community, in various ways, I certainly, and I know, the people that I've talked to who identify like me, for example, have had those, those voices, right? Have felt those blocks, have had those concerns. And this particular person, in response to your book, said it really galvanized them to think, if not me, then who? Right? Like, we all are capable of,
Yeah.
Unleashing this personal power and of building this community and this collective action and changing the things that we so desperately want to see changed.
We are. And I think that there are many of us who are able and have the ability. And I think we also have to recognize that there are many who are not, because of, the intersections that they stand in.
Mm.
Some of the most marginalized groups and marginalized people face enormous challenges. And so just, I want to be thoughtful and considerate of that, is that it's a hard journey, and it's a harder journey for many marginalized groups, the most marginalized in our community, than it is for others. And so for us who are able, it is for us to step up and do what we can to support and bring others with us, and to lead. And so, I think, yes, it's all of us have a role, and all of us have a place, and some of us have a bigger role. And some of us don't know what our role is, and some of us have been beaten up pretty bad, that it's really hard, to have hope, and it's hard to believe. And so it's really, you know recognizing that, acknowledging that, and helping people and empowering people to do what they're able to do, and for all of us to come together and bring the entire group forward. There's so many of us in groups also that are just working in silo, and the intentions are not always in the right place. And how do we bring people together? Because we are the ones that must create the change. We know what is needed. We know our journey better than anyone. And how can we support and elevate one another, and create it, not only a better selves, but a better world that we want and that we want to see. And I believe we can do it. But I also want to recognize it's a hard journey, and it's not for everyone. But I believe that people, in reading this book, that it will speak to people in different ways, along different, like you said, different elements of their journey. I've had people who are very young and in the beginning of activism, or they just, they don't really see themselves as an activist. Maybe they just want individual change. And then I've had people read it who've been on this journey for, a long time. And they all got something from it. I think about Pamela Isabella, who was one of my test readers and wrote the foreword. She's been in this space a long time, and she talked about how it really was impactful for her. It was something that she needed. And so I really believe it can speak to anyone along their journey. And I'm hopeful that it will help them no matter where they're at in their journey, whether they're on an individual journey or a collective journey, or they've been in this space, or they're just beginning. I just want everybody to see their own value, their personal power. And I just want, to activate people, assemble and activate people, and create a space where they feel safe, and they can also feel hopeful and believe, and have the tools to come together and create the big change that we need to see in this world. So that sums it up, I guess.
Yeah, that was. Well, I think my personal opinion is you did that. So congratulations.
Oh, well, thank you.
Can't wait till everybody else can see it too.
Thank you. So I appreciate it. And we're excited to share in the next episode. One of the things that you mentioned in the introduction is that, we're talking about some of the concepts in my book, not all of them, but some of them we're going to share between now and the launch. And then we're going to invite people into the next episode to talk about that particular concept, or how they exemplify it, or how they've activated it in their own lives. And many of them I've worked with in the past. And so we're going to have, the extraordinary Carly Lake, who's the CEO and founder of Lucky Sweater, who's going to be on the next episode. And she's going to talk about, how she found community, and how she's building community with a shared vision and purpose. And I remember Carly when I first met her, and she was working in marketing at Uber. And, she has just grown and come so far. I'm so proud of her. It just seeing her growth, it's really amazing to see, a young woman who was working on a marketing team, and and questioned her own, value at times, and really has worked through a lot to get where she's at today, to now have started her own company, moved to the Netherlands. Like, she made all these big moves all during a pandemic. And it's pretty exciting to talk to her and hear about her and how the community that she has now created through Lucky Sweater is about 200,000 people.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty big community, and she should be very proud of the community she has built. And so I think you'll really love the episode with Carly as she talks about building community. And you'll hear how she and Lucky Sweater are turning, as she calls it, on her website, turning closets into communities and making a difference in the world. So excited for that conversation with Carly next episode.
Me too, because we also talk about flamingos.
Yes, there's a whole conversation on flamingos.
It's very exciting times for yours truly.
So you definitely need to listen to that episode so you can just understand why we are going to talk a lot about flamingos. Those two, Carly, last thing I will say is Carly's brought a lot of sparkle to my life and a lot of glitter, and so have you.
Aww.
So, and then you two get together and you're talking about glitter and flamingos.
Yeah.
It sounds like a great episode.
It's like we opened up.
I'm like, let's build communities. Let's do this, and you guys are talking about flamingos.
No, it's like the scene.
But
from
we need that.
Those Trolls
we need that
movies.
In the community. Yeah, we need that.
And like where you open up the laptop and then just like the glitter
just like shoots
out into your face.
I love it.
I love it too. But yeah, Carly's amazing. We're excited to share her with you.
Yeah.
On her episode in the next couple weeks, and just as excited to continue these conversations, which I notice by all plan and design are very much like your book, right? Where you're talking about a really impactful concept towards creating that, social change that we all want to see. And then you're talking to people who've done it,
That's right.
Who can tell you, like,
people who've done it.
It wasn't easy, but here's how it went.
There's some powerful stories in the book, and I'm, including my own story. So, all right.
Awesome.
We'll see you next time.
Yep.